I'm Eric.
And I'm Jamie.
And this is Horrorscope, a podcast for people who love horror movies.
And people who want to love them. Hey y'all, it's Jamie. I know it's at the top of the episode, but I wanted to hop in here and let you know this isn't a normal episode of Horrorscope. We are talking about a topic, and that topic is violence in general. So we're moving through some different examples in media. So spoilers for the game The Last of Us Part 2. We don't spoil the game, but we talk about other people spoiling the game. So if you want to, steer clear of that entirely, heads up. We also somehow spoil Black Panther in the year 2020. I don't know how we managed that, but if you still haven't seen Black Panther, and you're holding out, I guess go watch it. Heads up. This is a pretty heavy episode. Not overall, but at parts towards the end. And we end up talking about some stuff I need to give a pretty heavy trigger warning for. We talk about suicidal ideation. We talk about obsessive compulsive disorder, intrusive thoughts, and anxiety in general, and violence in the media throughout. I mean, this is like different than anything we've put out so far, obviously, and it's like our 5th episode, but it was a conversation that I definitely needed to have as a newcomer to the genre, and I'm very grateful that Eric had it with me. So if you want to have a conversation with us about it, if you are, if you agree or disagree, or caught yourself wanting to reply to us like while listening or something like that, just hit us up on social. I'd love to talk about it more. And I'm very happy that we had this conversation. So without further ado, we're not going to have a break in the episode, so we will just get into it. So, all right, up top, this episode is not about a movie. So, if you want to hear us dunk on a movie, go listen to the It episode again. If you want to hear us bully Stephen King, just go listen to the It episode. I wanted to do a check-in for my own sake and for Eric's sake, and just to have a conversation. So, we have watched 4 movies so far? Yes. 4 movies so far. And we watched them pretty quickly. We watched 4 movies in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, which is pretty quick if you are me, who has not watched anything like a lot of these movies. And I think I got a little confident and a little proud of myself, and I was like, I can handle it. And it's nice to, like we were just saying off air, to use our brains in a way. It feels like I'm using my school analysis brain, and I fucking love school and I miss it so much. And it's nice to see you, and it's nice to just like think about something and really dig into it. So I kind of was just like, fuck yeah, let's just roll on through. And I don't think it's related, but I've been having a really fucking bad time mental health wise. And if I'm A/B testing my life, this is one thing that's pretty significantly changed. So I've been thinking a lot and examining how I feel about engaging in content. And it turns out there's a lot of conversations around other things I like or other things I enjoy thinking about that kind of fits in. So that being said, did you listen to the Besties?
I did listen to the Besties.
Yeah, the Besties is a video game. It's a good podcast.
A good podcast, good plug. We're not paid by the...
Oh my God, could you imagine if we were? Wow.
Oh man.
So I don't play video games, but I listen to the Besties, which is a video game review podcast by some video game journalists and former video game journalists that Eric and I are both a fan of. And I listened to it to kind of just catch up. I've enjoyed video games in the way that I've enjoyed horror movies. I'll read the plots and watch the trailers and watch playthroughs, but I just don't have the hand-eye coordination to swing it or the patience. So I enjoy them culturally and from afar. But I listened to their walkthrough about The Last of Us Part 2, and they spoil the whole thing and they talk about the plot. And I also have read about all the controversy surrounding this because I follow a subreddit called Hobby Drama, which is just where I love it, dude. If you are like me, go follow Hobby Drama. Oh, no, it's not. It's Hobby Snark. Yeah, I think it's one or the other. You'll find it. Where people post and talk about like very niche communities, like people in the knitting community arguing on Ravelry. Which I also love. I just love the drama. But The Last of Us Part 2 is really controversial. What did you think? Because you're a fan of the first game, right, Eric?
Yeah, I am. And the script for Last of Us 2 leaked a while back, and a lot of people were upset about it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was because of the story. So I actually spoiled it for myself and read the leak.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I was fine with listening to the spoiler episode. Also, like what we discussed is that
pulled a Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I knew. I'm pretty much I'm the Jamie in this situation because it's one game where I was like, I like the first game quite a bit. I don't think I love it as much as some people do.
Yeah.
But then when it was coming down, I was like, I don't want to play this, and I'm like, well, it's just like this time that we're living in. I just don't want that kind of violence in my life, which we'll get into. But then I saw the controversy and I like read up on it. And I thought the controversy was just going to be around like the story because I like I mean, of course, reading the script versus actually seeing it play out are two completely different things. But some of the beats that they put in the game seem pointless and just I didn't like it. And I was like, okay, that's why everybody's mad about it. And then as the game was coming out, I found out there are some people like that, but there's also some people who are mad about other things in the game, which just deeply sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very dumb to be like just the fact that you can play a game that's like 30 hours of extreme realistic murder and violence and you're mad at having a trans kid in the game. Like,
that's so dumb.
Grow up or choke on a brick.
It's so weird because Last of Us specifically is a game that like it's definitely tries to be like a reflection of humanity and like try to teach us about humans.
Yeah.
And you'd think people who are fans of a game like that would be more sympathetic, but
overwhelmingly no.
but fuck no, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Besties brought up a good point where I mean, some people who are complaining about it too are attracted to it because of the violence, even though the game is trying to commentate on violence.
Here, that's the thing. So
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're not. No, you're not. So the theme of this episode is violence. Not ultra violence, the hit Lana Del Rey album. So we are talking about violence and the relationship that violence has in different forms of media and your relationship to it. Because listening to this episode, the game developer said that the first game is about love and this game is about hate. And I'm like, duh. Like, okay, cool, heavy, cool. And the point that the Besties came to is that the game is trying to, it's just basically a self-congratulatory jerk-off, is my opinion, because they're trying to say this lofty, like, ooh, violence doesn't solve anything, but then you spend your 30 hours of gameplay, like, ripping people's throats out and watching people get hung and disemboweled. So you're not saying anything, you're part of the problem. And I know that Naughty Dog is the studio, they have, like, a real strong history of that kind of level of violence in their games, as most games do. So I was wondering, like, thinking about that, in that conversation, I was reminded of something I do play and is really dear and near to my heart, which is Dungeons and Dragons. And, oh wow, I love that gasp. You weren't ready.
I thought you were going to talk about Animal Crossing.
Oh my god, no. No, I'm talking about D&D. I love D&D a lot. Eric and I play in several D&D campaigns together, and we have for the last few years. And I run a game as well for some of my friends, and it is the best part about D&D is the collaborative nature of it and the way people come together to tell a story. But D&D is rotten to its core. And like the game system. And we're going to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty, I guess, but so D&D's mechanics are built on the premise of violence. It's a colonizer's game. Like you are rewarded for slaughter, you level up for combat. There's even the joke trope, and not even a joke in a lot of times, of murder hobos, so people who just treat a D&D game like a video game and go around killing everybody and not wanting consequences and like looting stuff. And it sounds like a real weenie move, but I've felt a little nauseous sometimes talking about violence in combat. Or like, I'm a fan of Critical Role, which is a actual play D&D podcast stream thing on Twitch. I'm sure you've heard of it. And there's a famous line when you kill someone or something, and their DM says, "How do you want to do this?" And then the person gets to explain their kill in like excruciating detail, and you're supposed to cheer and like feel really good. But sometimes in that game too, I felt like, woof, just like visualizing it is really difficult and it feels really bad. And D&D, so there's like a lot of problems baked into D&D, specifically racist problems, very racist problems. And I did a performance art solo show about D&D a few years ago for like my capstone in college, and it was about queer world building in D&D, but I did touch on like racism and ableism in the game. And Wizards of the Coast is actually changing some stuff. I don't know, did you see that?
Yeah, I thought they're getting rid of evil races. Is that how
Yeah. So they're getting rid of required alignment for races, which I ignored anyway. But if you're not familiar with D&D, there are some races that are like inherently evil and brutish. Those races are dark-skinned. Surprise. It's disgusting. It is like it's a true problem. And getting rid of the evil races doesn't get rid of the origins of the game. And the solution is to stop playing D&D. Like. Right. The solution for you can't fix it. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's unfixable at its core, even if you are trying to re-engage in it in a different way or play with what you are given or work around it. You are still playing in a system that is like fundamentally broken. So here's the thing. I said the solution is to walk away and play a different game. That might not be true. But I thought it was interesting in the way that video games and D&D are both asking you to commit the violence, but in a video game, it's asking you to commit the violence to achieve an objective and win, whereas D&D is asking you to commit violence and choose your violence and roleplay and imagine your way through very violent situations to create a narrative. So you are like an active participant in creating a narrative, and you can make it as violent or non-violent as you want, but it is still it's built to reward that. And I know I just spoke so long but I've just been thinking about it a lot. Have you had any like similar feelings in either of these games?
I think it's difficult to talk about violence because fundamentally violence is wrong. Yet we consume violence in so many formats, and at least me, I know I consume it so much because I play so many video games and I enjoy the combat system in D&D, and I read things and watch movies with violence in it. I don't know what this like the right answer is.
There's no right answer.
I think it's really the context of it too, right? Because like I think like a lot of people like don't realize when they're like playing D&D. I think there's definitely intent behind making the races darker skin, having races inherently evil. But I think that at the same time, a lot of people, they want to do that. They want to figure out some sort of foreign thing that they can just kill willingly and not have any consequence to. That's like most video games.
I know.
It's the story of good versus evil. If you got somebody who's good, you gotta have somebody who's bad. And usually one of the solutions to figure out how to stop the bad thing is to like kill the bad thing. And
I guess in the past, it has been a really it's just a really quick, easy, lazy shorthand to make that racist or other or or queer. There's a lot of queer villains in media. Like, just make it different than the idealized person that is participating in that system.
I think, well, two things real quick. One, I think
Yeah.
it requires. I think D&D is. I don't know how much we should maybe talk about D&D. I think we should talk about media and the non-choice, because in D&D, you have a set rules, but it's so up to you to what. Like, you could technically have a campaign where characters only talk and then give and level them up. Sure, gives them more powers to kill things, but there's plenty of spells and stuff that don't do that.
Yeah.
And then also it puts more effort on the DM, and I think, like, that's, I mean, fifth edition is kind of starts to lean into it, where it is putting more emphasis on the role playing aspect, because another plug, Dimension 20, completely deconstructed the evil races. I mean, party members are goblins and half orcs, and that's not the villain. The villain is something completely. It's like a religion or whatever. And I do think that that it's up to you and your team to come up with rules that allow for that to happen. Because another thing that's interesting about D&D is that when you go into combat, you roll initiative, and when you roll initiative, that pretty much means any sort of talking is over, and that violence is the only way to end it, and you have to pretty much defeat everyone in order to end the initiative. Whereas if you wanted to be maybe more thought-provoking, you could end it by having them be like, wait, what are we doing? Or like, stop, I see the miscommunication, start talking about it again.
Yeah, which is definitely possible. I know it is a choice of a player, and it's something that I've engaged in. Absolutely. Like, I love smashing my big fantasy hammer and hitting things, but like, it is up to whoever is running a game and playing in a game. But that to me is the only reason I wanted to talk about it, because it's my only context for creating or engaging in violent media is a collaborative story I have told with other people. So I am, like, inherently complicit in the violence of that game, right? I've never played video games ever, like, in my child or adult life, except for at the dentist in the lobby when I played Yoshi's Island on their, like, old ass Game Boy or whatever system that's on. No one at me on Twitter, or I don't know.
We'll have followers to add us.
Hey, you haven't seen my Animal Crossing fan account from my Twitter.
Follow us and then add us, please.
Yeah, you know what? Sure.
All followers.
We'll take
if
it.
You want to write in the comments. Jamie is a pro at it. I'll let her handle that.
Oh, great.
I'm jumping.
But I've never played video games, and I've never watched horror movies. So all of this is a long thought experiment to get to the end question I asked myself, is that, am I complicit in the problems of horror movies or horror media or violence or the spectacle of violence by watching horror movies? And what is that doing to my brain? And that's a whole lot of context for just that question, but I ended up talking to my dear friend Fargo, and who is a horror movie buff and is one of the people I spoke about in episode 0, whose opinion I really respect, who his point of view and academic work and art, I really trust his point of view. But I called him today, and I was talking to him because he's a huge horror fan, and I asked him this question because I have been feeling weird about it. And it's funny that of course you did, Eric, but you hit on it it took me so long to hit on it, but you got right to the core of it immediately. It's about the context. So before I want to talk about the conclusion we came to talking and what I've been thinking about in the meantime, I want to know I think you were getting there and I interrupted you. How do you feel about the violence you consume in media, I guess? Does it affect you? Have you noticed an effect on you over time? Like, how does it feel to be in that?
It's a very hard question to answer.
I know. And I know it's a heavy question too. I know it's like so tell me, how do you feel being horrible is what it sounds like, and that's not what I'm trying to do. There's no gotcha, but I just want to
Right.
know, because even when we started this podcast, I didn't know that you were a secret chicken in your heart and that you were initially scared for a long time. But something obviously attracts you to those forms of media. And the conclusion I came to that I'll talk about more is that it's not moral the way you feel about it. It may be video games, but at least watching movies, it's not like a moral thing you're doing, which I will hold off on my thoughts about that because I want to pick your brain about it. Did I give you enough
Sure.
time to stall and think?
Man, I'm just gonna ramble, and then we'll see if there's like a point to it.
A nugget?
Yeah, oh, that's okay. I have when you approached me with this topic,
Yeah,
it got me thinking a lot, and then I realized I didn't have any basis for it. So I went out there and found a bunch of articles
I know you did.
to kind of like almost like I know you're not adding me, but it really like the question of like violence is wrong, yet you consume and enjoy violence on a daily basis.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I like to play a lot of different video games, and not all video games are inherently violent. There's a lot of games out there that are just beautiful story pieces or puzzles or being a dude on an island trying to catch a fish. There's just like there's so many different types of games, but I am attracted to the shooter. I grew up in like peak shooter times.
Yeah.
Sorry, early Doom fans, but like I grew up during like Halo and the peak of Call of Duty and all these games. I've always been attracted to more of like the fantasy and sci-fi. I think there is a dissonance to fantasy games because you're using magic and you're using swords. Like these are such outdated forms of violence that we
Sure.
don't really like associate them with. But then
Yes, the old form of violence, magic.
Are you trying to tell me magic isn't real?
We don't have time for that. Keep going.
And like violence has always been our media, but yeah. So I was always more attracted to like the Halo once it comes to guns to the Halo than like the Call of Duty, because in Halo you're fighting these weird alien people. They're trying to kill you, so you got to kill them, and then you got these weird laser guns, and you're just firing off of them. Or like when you're playing multiplayer, you just respawn, so you're not really killing a person. You don't see a bunch of blood and stuff. They just kind of fade or fall over.
Sure.
And so it's more when you're playing a video game, it's like the interactive experience. Like I think a lot of like mobile games have proven is that you just need that little bit of dopamine. You need a little bit of that engagement. You need that little bit of a reward to continue on.
Yeah.
It just happens that shooting things is a very fun way of doing that. But we talked about it a while ago in the quarantine. I've been trying to like play video games to keep myself busy because it does keep I think it's a great way to keep your mind engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And also for me, like communicating with my friends who also play video games, it's a good way for us to talk while doing something else.
Yeah.
But I had gotten to the point where I was kind of tired with the other ones I was playing, and so I eventually went back to Call of Duty. And when I went to go back to play Call of Duty, just like a lot of these horror movies, I suddenly got like really kind of like uncomfortable and weird about it. Like I felt like kind of like a little bit nausea because I'm seeing these characters. I'm using like real guns, and we're in these real scenarios, and I'm seeing these dudes who look like the guys who are at alt-right rallies, pretty much like these bearded, vested dudes with their assault rifles who are just kind of casually going up to police and talking to them while peaceful protesters are being murdered and ran over.
Yeah.
And so just like that context just like kind of immediately made me not like the game, but of course I wanted to interact with my friends and continue, so I continued to play it. And then there is that certain level where it's just like when you're in the moment, you're just kind of shooting things. You see an object and you're just pointing and clicking to get the objective done.
Yeah.
I know. So after I've consumed so much media violence that I'm very much like I'm like a very passive person. Like I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in violence. When I see violence, I get upset in real life, but somehow I don't know what it is that allows me to see violence in movies and video games, and I don't get affected by it. And movies I can talk about a lot more, but video games I don't. There's no connection to it. The people have talked about video game violence for years, and studies continue to say that people who play video games don't end up like that. That doesn't correlate to more violence.
There has to be some kind of an effect on your psyche, right? Like even if it's just desensitization, and you have to just keep upping the ante, and it has to be more and more and more and more, right? Because people do get desensitized to the images that they're seeing.
That's that. I mean, that kind of ties into what I was going to talk about with movies,
Yeah.
because I don't know. Like, I really like my slasher movies, and those, they're just there for the kills at a certain point in time. You're just there to see how people are going to be murdered. But there's like a spectacle to it. It's something like how you want to do this scenario, where like
Yeah.
Jason's gonna pick up a person in a sleeping bag and whack them against a tree. Uh, and it's like it's so fantastical and outlandish in a lot of those movies that it kind of doesn't register as realism. Now that I mean, I don't know, because I was gonna say, because now that we're getting closer, like Hereditary has like,
Yeah.
now that we're getting so much better at these special effects.
Okay, so you're talking that viewing the action, you're not thinking about it as a something that a possibility. You're thinking about it as a media effect, like a tech effect. Like you're trying to see how they pull off the trick.
Yeah. So there, I mean, there's like, there, I mean, I have a lot of other points to bring up, but one of my first points is craftsmanship,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that comes down to the skill and the special effects. I think there's a lot of people who aren't like that. I think this is very much a, I
Nerd
think
problem.
no.
Nerd.
Thank you. That's why I started off at the top. I think it is for people who are more engaged with the movie, other than just putting something on to watch it and get some sort of reaction out of it.
Because you went to film school.
Oh, we don't have to talk about that.
I mean, of course we do.
Oh
Eric.
my god! But I don't even think you need to go to film school to appreciate. Like, if you enjoy movies and like to watch movies, especially horror movies, there's magazines that are dedicated to just the special effects of it.
Yeah.
So when you're watching it, you have like this spectacle of like, holy shit, look how good that looks. Like, look how realistic that looks.
I think
Or like
that's
even the opposite direction of like a Suspiria film, where it's so surreal. The way they color the blood looks so unrealistic. Is also fascinating, where you appreciate the art form to it.
I think you have the benefit of experience in the genre to be able to, because when you see that, you know what a good effect is and what it isn't, and you're able to check it against other things that you've seen.
Right.
And I think I do think you are in a really unique position, that you are a, I don't know, you could have got red pilled by all this content. You know? Like you could have, and that sounds, that I know that sounds dumb, but we have to think about the context of us, like our own lens of watching these movies, because we're two white cis people watching these films. And like I know I think even our positions are different. Like you as a straight guy and me as a queer woman, we are both running different analysis in our heads at all times. But you really could have gone the other way. Like every opportunity was there for you to start reveling it, and like watching a Siberian film and seeking out like more and more and more, and then maybe engaging in violence in your life in some kind of way. And it doesn't have to be like immense violence, but living a life that is not reflective of the values that I know you have. And I think what?
How do I put this? Are you trying to pull this out from just like our perspectives and to the general community who consume this media?
I just think it's worth thinking about. I think you're in a really unique spot. You're a fan of the genre, and you hate violence in real life, but you love violence in fantasy life, and you are looking at it as a craftsman. You're looking at it as a, how did they pull the trick off, when I am looking at it, as I said, with my fresh idiot eyes, and I am thinking about myself or other real ass people in those situations. And I don't know if that's better or worse, but that to me felt, thinking about, I'm just not used to violent images. I'm like really not. And
Right.
thinking about, and like Fargo and I were talking too about how the wires get crossed frequently, and he was saying that the research he's looked at says that women consume horror much more than men do, which I was really interested by. And it's like, it's playing with a lot of different things, and you can't answer it for every single person, right? But
I
Sorry.
do want to say that. No, well, I think that you're talking about, because the way it's coming off right now, and I know it's not meant to come off this way,
Sure.
but you're saying that I'm like I'm a special unique case, and there's other special unique cases out there of people who can consume this media and not be affected by it, or like not be like corrupted and red pilled by it. But as a person who's been in the horror community and been around people who enjoy the genre, and I mean, you started off talking about people that you have in your life and professors who've talked about the horror genre. I think that my ability to consume the media and not be corrupted by it isn't a anomaly.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
think
might
that
just not know that.
I think there's a lot of people out there who consume, because you have to think about how many people watch horror movies
Yeah.
and don't commit violent acts.
I'm not even. Don't
And
worry.
you have
I'm
to
not.
think-
I'm not like a. This isn't like a Save the Children special.
No,
You know.
I know. I think there are other reasons why people watch horror movies, and
Yeah.
I think that people are able to consume them in the way that doesn't influence them to go out and do something. Are there people who are influenced by it, who might develop opinions about other people because of the way they watch movies and about how they should react to that kind of stuff? Yeah, but is it the movie that is going? I mean, them having access to the movie might be triggering that, but they might have that innately within them. Because I also believe that there are people who don't watch horror movies who also enact violence
Oh.
towards others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I think maybe my mind is more closed off than I thought it was.
Even if even if, let's say hypothetically, horror movies and video games didn't exist, we could just go back and talk. Like, violence has always persisted. We've always been fascinated by violence.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't think media has made us
more violent? No, absolutely not. We used to kill people for sport.
Go out and watch people get hanged in the streets.
Yeah, I
could
don't
not do that. I could watch a bout of Buster Scruggs and watch what's his face, the shitty dude, James Franco get hung. That's fine. But I can't see actual James Franco be hung, even though he's
safe.
Dude. But he's safe for now.
He's safe for now. Actually, you know what? That's very helpful. That framework is very helpful. Call of Duty's not so bad. I feel like I sound, well, you know what? It's not even sound. I feel like I am closed-minded when it comes to this. And
but you're new to it too. And like I think
it's also how
you're 4 movies in, and you're very insightful. You're very like inwardly think. You think things through thoroughly, and that, again, that's your school brain. That's your comm major, and I think it's like that's why I love doing this podcast with you.
Oh.
I think it's good. I think it's good that we've had this discussion after like 4 episodes, and we're already on this big topic.
Yeah. Well, it was inevitable to come up. So I guess it's important to give. So all that to say, you had initially 4. You're like, I have 4 points. The first one is craftsmanship, and I was like, boo. So do you remember your 3 other ones?
I'm gonna run down everything else I had to say.
Okay.
And you can jump in and commentate on.
Can I go get a White Claw?
You can get a White Claw, Jamie. You deserve a White Claw.
You're right. You're right.
You deserve 5 White Claws.
Damn straight. I'll be right back. Hang on. Boo. Was that scary?
No.
Oh, dang it. Okay.
You like clunking in.
Oh, man. Come on.
I heard the White Claw.
Dang it. Okay, go ahead.
So, a few of the things I thought about that I want to kind of run through of why people like horror movies and violence in general. There's the challenge and endurance of it. There's the deeper level context where it says something. And then there's the sense of like satisfaction or like justice, or that kind of like victory mentality, the good triumphing evil. And then I also at the end wanted to talk about kind of like other forms of trauma that we put ourselves through that media gives us.
Oh, goody.
And also people consuming actual violence, to pull out the intention of the filmmaker and the people who put out this media. I think this has been since, like the exploitation times. This really had a resurgence in like the early 2000s when they decided to make a bunch of really kind of like saw, gore porn, grotesque things, or like Hostel. It's something about one, the director gets a thrill out of it because they get to put something in front of people and get a reaction out of them, try to shock them. We talked about like with Alien how people fainted in the audience and like threw up. Like that's always been like The Exorcist had that, Paranormal Activity had that. Like there's something great when you can get that much of a reaction out of someone.
Yeah.
But on the end of the consumer, where you get, I think, some horror fans who might go to those extremes, they like to challenge themselves and show their own endurance. It's something like it's that like competitive nature in humans to be like, oh, like that was fucked, but I can watch something even more gross and be.
Oh my god, that was me. I'm an idiot. That was me.
The
That was me a week ago, Eric.
Right, because you're like, what's next? We could go harder. So it's you've already experienced that.
Watch me prove every point.
I only pulled a few articles. One was what attracts people to violence in movies, which is a study done in Germany where they polled about 500 people and showed them violent trailers. And then there was another one, In a Brutal World, Why Do We Like Violent Entertainment, from the Chicago Tribune. One of their points was talking about the attraction repulsion syndrome, where we see something in the Chicago Tribune article. It talks about watching torture in movies and why we watch that. It talks about the context of it, because it's saying something. If the movie is done right, it's saying something about the human condition. It's like a dialogue scene, you know, like you're watching. Usually, there's more going on than just the violence in the situation.
Sure.
And it's trying to say something about the human condition, either how much a human is willing to go through if they have some sort of cause or goal in mind, or it shows what other people are willing to do to other people. And to be clear, this is the horror that we talked about off the top that I don't like this.
Yeah. I
think a lot of times in a lot of movies, they're just there to shock. They're not really there to say anything. That sounds kind of like what The Last of Us, like you have to be smart about it. You have to be really smart about what you're trying to do. And the more extreme you go, the smarter you have to be.
That's a great point.
Do think there are limits. There's another article. Yeah, so the horror fans are psychologically coping with the pandemic better than most.
We talked about that
which we talked about on the other podcast.
Yeah.
I think, what was that? That was Return of the Living Dead, I think.
Yes.
And there's a quote that says, exposure to frightening fiction allows audiences to participate effective coping strategies that can be beneficial in real world situations. So we talked about the thrill, like being chased by the lion, and we're trying to obtain that, but we're trying to obtain that on our own turf, which we've done a lot in this podcast. Think about it. Like when we watch movies, we watch them during the day, we watch them together. We skip through parts that we might not like. We have like full control over the media that we are experiencing in front of us.
That's a good point.
And so it's
by design.
By design, yeah. So you're pretty much watching something potentially horrific or horrifying, but it's in fiction, so you have some sort of dissonance there, and you have control while watching it. It's not something horrific happening to you right in front of you that you have no control over. And so I think which this study has shown, that when you're finally faced with that thing, since you had these micro doses of these challenges, I think we always talk about like desensitization, where we get desensitized to these horrific images. So then when horrific things happen, we don't care. But what it's showing here is that we get these horrific things happening, and then when something horrific happens, we're just able to cope about it better, but we still are affected by it.
It's a point of reference.
Yeah. So that way, when you have a pandemic, it's not like I'm still, this pandemic has sucked for me, but
you're like, I love it. Having a good time.
But it's just helping you cope with that. So it doesn't make the event any worse. It just allows you to witness it and potentially deal with it or solve it better.
Yeah. I think so. I can't talk about this any further without talking about my own like very personal context. But I decided I do want to talk about my mental health history a little bit. Not to hijack the show, but
always talking about your
mental illnesses. My brain. Other conversations I've heard specifically on podcasts about stuff I deal with has really helped me out. So if it can help anyone else. So I am a very anxious person, as I talked about, and I have OCD, which I got diagnosed 2 years ago. And it's really funny when we talk about fight or flight. After we talked about it, I actually talked about this with my therapist. Shout out to Julie. I talked about, she said the way my brain chemistry is my body is constantly in fight or flight all the time. And it puts strain on my body and my brain because of like past reaction to trauma I've dealt with. My brain is like, we are not safe here. And all anxiety disorders they are just a way of your brain trying to protect you, but just doing it incorrectly. So my brain feels like I am directly being threatened all the time. So I am running through all of those chemicals of being chased by the lion. Like when you said that's what you're chasing after, I was like, I want that to stop. Right. And also, it's interesting that, so specifically for OCD, do you know what intrusive thoughts are?
Please explain.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So an intrusive thought is a reoccurring thought that you can't get out of your head, that just runs through your brain. So the way it's been explained to me before that was helpful is normal brains are nets that catch thoughts and then let them go, but OCD will not let the thought go. Or they show up, like even neurotypical people have intrusive thoughts sometimes, but it will just get caught in the net and you can't let it go. And I was trying to talk around it because I didn't know how personal I wanted to be when we were talking about episode 0, when I said specifically, like, if I see a violent image, I will think about it for 2 years. And I kind of was like, haha, but that's the truth. Like, it will just be behind my eyelids, and it turns into my brain trying to be like, well, why are you thinking about it so much? It must mean that you actually are enjoying thinking about this, or enjoying the concept that is so horrifying to you. And the OCD is, it is devastating. It is not something I would wish on my worst enemy. It's a untreated, horrible way to live. Treated, pretty bad way to live. And I'm managing it as best I can. But there's something that humans deal with called, it's a French term. I can't speak French. It translates to call of the void. Are you familiar with the concept?
Nope.
Nope. It's like when you're standing by a ledge and you're like, I want to fucking jump off that thing. Right? Has that ever happened to you?
Oh yeah.
That's an intrusive thought. Yeah, you're driving, you're like, let me drive off a cliff. Let me jump off this thing. Let me do whatever. Like, that's an intrusive thought. But if you have a neurotypical brain, you're able to be like, that was weird, and then keep driving. But someone with a disorder like OCD would be like, oh my God, why did I think that? Do I actually want to kill myself? Why am I throwing away my life? How do I keep living while thinking that I want to kill myself? How do you keep going after you've had that thought? There's no point to come back. My family would be devastated. How is anyone supposed to move on? And that's it, all the time, constantly, from then on out. From when you had the thought until a new thought shows up. And then it's time to worry about that one. So that is a very specific context. But a lot of people who have OCD they struggle with violent images and thoughts about like harming themselves or harming other people. And the thing that is so heartbreaking about it as an illness is that it's basically like your brain comes up with the worst way to hurt you. So it's like the thing you love the most, then you imagine it being destroyed by yourself. Which is a pretty heavy topic, but I was thinking about this. So this is my lens that I'm viewing these movies through, right? Among other lenses that intersect with this history that I have. But Fargo pointed out to me, and it's something I've been thinking about since I spoke to him, the movie is not, you aren't participating in the movie by watching it, you are just witnessing it, and audiencing it. And the important thing is that it's a combination of what the movie is afraid of and a combination of what you are afraid of. So you're thinking about what does it mean? Like, if the movie is afraid of something that I am not afraid of, what does that tell me about the people who created it? What does that tell me about their intention of their audience? And what does that tell me about myself? And the thing that freaks me out is I'm worried something I'm going to be afraid of is going to come up in one of these movies, and I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about it. But I think that it's really difficult, right? Because I actually think the scariest thing that's ever happened to me has already happened. And I think that it was dealing with this undiagnosed, because I thought I was like fundamentally broken. And I thought that I was like beyond fixing. I was like, there's no way to fix me if I'm thinking these things, and like I can't function, I can't live. And then I found out about OCD, because the perception about OCD is like, you might think like flipping light switches or like washing your hands a lot, right?
Right.
Or like organizing your pens, or like the show Monk. And it is that sometimes. And then it's also this sometimes. And like the images that we're seeing, the violent images, teach you as an audience member about what the film fears. And I know it's not super realistic, but part of me is afraid that something is going to come up that's like worse than that, what I've already dealt with. And I hope, I mean, I don't know if that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Maybe not. I have hopefully a long life to live, or at least some more time on this planet. And it might get much worse. But so far in my shortish life, the experience has been the worst thing. And I hope it is the worst thing, because it can never be that bad again for me. But because now I have the context needed to handle it and understand it. Not knowing what the problem was the worst part. And I know it's a much bigger question, and it's about me. It's not even necessarily about the film, but it's about the nature of witnessing violence. And I started getting worried about what it meant about me that I was participating in the violence that is reflected in these films, but I'm not actually participating in it. I'm just watching it. And the conclusion that we came to in that conversation, and that I would like to run by you and see if you agree, but it sounds like you do, is that you are watching something horrific happen is not a moral act. You are just doing it. What do you think? Have you dropped off audio? Are you gone?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
I know that was so much. I got worried that your audio like cut halfway through that, and I was just talking.
No, you needed to talk.
Yeah. Maybe it's irresponsible of me to not have given you that context. But I didn't think it would matter as much as it's mattered. So, yeah. Which is maybe naive of me to assume that it wouldn't be that way. But it's just bad timing with a pretty difficult spell of things that you know about going on. So it's just bad, weird timing, and also a brand new thing going on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think you're very brave to be able to talk about it, and I really hope that we're able to format this and have somebody else like listen to it and help them too.
Yeah, it sucks. Like, I don't want to talk about it. It's my business, and also right. it sucks. Like, it sucks to talk about it.
I did. Yeah, I was thinking more in the way of like why violence in horror movies are good versus how they could impact somebody.
Which is why I think both are important points.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I want to have conversations like this, and so here's the thing too. All of that extremely heavy shit combined with I've had like a bad mental health situation like the last month. I don't think it's related to the movies. And I know I said I was A/B testing, but I really don't think it is, because it's all unrelated. And so I just got caught up in being like, I don't feel bad watching the movies, and I don't feel bad thinking about them afterwards. Something Fargo and I talked about is how like horror heals a lot of people. Which sounds strange, maybe, if you're coming from my initial point of view. So the difference is, in the different types of audiencing, which is a performance concept, and I was trying to find the definition, and I couldn't because I didn't keep any of my damn notes from school. But there's like bearing witness And that is for observing like human rights violations, right? And not choosing to look away from real life violence in the way that you were talking about because you're uncomfortable. And it's something that I think a lot of people have had to do or consciously decide not to do, especially in the last few months. And not doing that, being able to look away and not engage with violence that's happening to other like real ass humans is a huge privilege. So that is one way. And I don't know if that is a way that someone consumes media, but it is a way that someone observes violence in real life. So that is the context I have had. But another thing, too, is that I was thinking also about extreme haunted houses, which is another one of my near and dear rabbit holes that I love going down, where people are paying like a ton of money and signing waivers that are like, we can murder you if we want, to feel like the victim in that situation, not to feel like the torturer. Well, I'm sure people would pay to be a torturer in one of those haunted houses too if that was an option. I digress. But it's all worth thinking about the way that people are, like what the purpose of it is. But what we landed on, and I think what you were landing on before I got lost in the sauce there for a second, is that it isn't a moral act to observe something, but the way that you work to understand it could turn into a moral act if you act on that understanding. It's not a moral act until you make it a moral act. Right. Until then, you're just observing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our weird minds are able to consume horrible acts that morally don't fit what you're dealing with, and you're able to enjoy it. Because it's weird, because like slasher films, because I had a few more points, but I'll jump down to, because where my thought process was going with like, okay, violence in media, horror movies, and I think I have a better understanding of like why, like there's so much thought behind like why horror movies are attractive to people and why we like them.
Mm-hmm.
But where it got confusing for me was like action movies, because action movies are also very violent. But I don't think they have I don't think people enjoy them for the same reason. I think there might be some overlap, but I think there's a little bit of difference.
That's a really good point.
But like, okay, so like taking two steps back before I forget about this point. It's weird how like with slasher movies, which are all about murdering people, eventually people start to enjoy the slasher. Like the first few Friday the 13th movies, or like the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, the person that is trying to murder people is obviously the villain of the situation. Yet somehow we get Freddy Mania, we get Freddy dolls, we get Freddy
sexy Halloween costumes and Funko Pops.
Funko Pops. I have his greatest hits record. He kills it on there. I have a photo with the actor because I love him so much. But Freddy Krueger is a child murderer and potentially, I mean, like they just don't say it, but he's a child molester.
Oh no! Oh my God!
It's horrific. Why would anybody in any other context, nobody would like that, but for some reason we're able to consume that media and like distance ourselves from their actions and enjoy some of the actions that they have. And then, I mean, I guess the movies try to justify that later on by making the teens worse and worse and stupider, and they get as they go. But I would argue even when horror movies are at their best, they make you care about the person, and then they murder that person, and you still get some sort of thrill out of it. But then going into action movies, I had that dilemma because, I mean, not to bring him up again, but I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he has very famous scenes throughout all of his movies, including Commando, where he is trying to save his daughter from these bad guys, and they go to the mansion, and Arnold Schwarzenegger kills conservatively like 100 people, just mowing down dudes. I mean, in this context, it just gets to the point of ridiculousness. Yeah. Where, I mean, of course, these guys are just on like springboards getting flung back, and they just have blood packets just popping off.
Yeah.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger is carrying this one-armed gun that's just completely unbelievable, and he's just destroying it. But I think it's like, I think we see that more I think Game of Thrones is like the pinnacle of what we've seen that become, because it is that point that I was going to talk about a little bit in the sense of justice and like victory. It's like good versus evil. Like you want to see Like in the first Star Wars movies, you want to see Luke Skywalker kill Darth Vader because Darth Vader's the bad guy. Later on, they introduce the even worse guy, and then they make you sympathize with Darth Vader because you can't sympathize with the villain. And I think that for a long time, that was like that's the case for storytelling. If you want to tell a basic story, you have like a hero's journey, and the person faces off against some big bad thing that's just bad. That's their motive, and then they die. I think then we slowly have come to the point where we start realizing that like bad people are bad for a reason. So then we kind of deconstruct that, but we still.
That seems like exactly like the point The Last of Us is trying to say too.
Right. I think a good example of that where we start to become more conscious and aware of our storytelling and we try to tell deeper stories, but we still want to tell the exact same story because that's fundamentally how our ape brains consume stories the best. It's Black Panther, because in Black Panther, the villain has like really fucking good points and like makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie realizes that. And there's certain points like after Michael B. Jordan goes back in he goes through his transformation and he sees his father and has this like emotional discussion and you sympathize with him so much. The second he comes out of that trance, he's yelling at everyone, telling them to burn all the plants because he has to be the last Black Panther.
Yeah.
And like everyone else. And then like that's the end of the movie too, where it just kind of devolves into like this train battle and then he just gets stabbed.
Yeah, it was not a good ending. I didn't.
You want to tell the same story, but then you just like you stumbled upon something too smart for your movie, and but Marvel is just like, no, he has to die because he's a villain, unless it's Loki for some reason.
That was a good fucking movie. Shit, that was a good movie.
I just wish they had him like live or like give him more of a platform.
Yeah, or like let him walk away.
And so, but like that, so like here we have ourselves stumbling on our own storytelling because we've become too conscious. Where we've come to the point where D&D can't just be humans versus goblins because goblins are people too. Fuck, I hate that sentence. But then we get to the point of like Game of Thrones where
man, I don't want to tell you, I fucking hate Game of Thrones.
I loved it at one point, and then of course
I hated it the whole fucking time because
you're ahead of all of us.
Oh, you know what? Thank you. I love hearing that. I felt like the violence in Game of Thrones was absolutely senseless. It's particularly the violence against women and just having people get raped left and right for character development. I thought it was lazy. I thought it was bad. It made me uncomfortable. And I read the books. So I read 3 of the books and then they got really boring. So I stopped reading the books. And then watching the show, I was just like, how did they add more rape to the show than was in the books? Because there was already so much of it. And I don't know. So is your point that I know people love biblical justice and Game of Thrones has some of that ish, I guess, but No,
I was saying like it's this weird because I'm talking about the development of like thought and like how we decide to tell stories, because you go from good versus evil to good versus maybe kind of evil but has a point, but good still needs to triumph, to Game of Thrones where you like in classic Night Tales, the knight stabs the dude and it's done. I think you brought up a little bit earlier about upping the ante, and Game of Thrones is like that. It's like, all right, we need to do horrifying things to these people, so the person who's going to get horrifying things done to needs to do more horrific things to be justified in doing those horrible things. And people love that. They love their
they did love it.
They're just so horrible, and then you see them get murdered and you're like, and again, it's that sense of justice and victory. And so I think that, I mean, yeah, that's another version of violence where it's just like we're getting very interesting stories. I think you see that a lot in like comic books. You see a lot of comic books come out with stories that aren't just superheroes anymore.
Yeah.
You Let Me Nimona. It's just like a
so
very good story.
Fucking
it has
good.
A little bit of violence in it, but it's like it's telling such a different story.
Yeah. As much as I hate to say it, I'm glad you brought up Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they're just making more horrific things that are that eventually have to at a certain point become senseless. And then that's the theme of Game of Thrones. Everyone hated the last season because literally we watched all these horrific things happen for nothing.
Yeah, that context is very helpful because I forgot about popular media. I forgot about action movies. And I forgot about Game of Thrones, mercifully.
But going back to craftsmanship real quick, like John Wick, I know you haven't seen because there's death and it's very sad.
I kind of still want to see it and just skip that part.
It's just the beginning.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get it. I would do the same thing.
And then the movie just ups the ante by just giving you other dogs that are badasses that kill people.
All right.
But John Wick is like that also has violence. It has celebrated violence because of its like that's where I was talking about I was going to talk about how craftsmanship broke into the mainstream. Although I might be watching a horror movie and being like, "Oh, that's a cool effect," a lot of people aren't. But John Wick was successful in the way that what they're selling you on is how well crafted the violence is, and people like that, and people can like admire that. But it's the effort that goes behind it. I don't think it's necessarily the actions that they are causing. But that's like, I guess, video games. It's like goes back to video games too. Like there's a section of it that you're enjoying just because of these elements, but there still is violence happening, and that's where I don't know the answer. Like I don't know, like, is me playing video games or watching John Wick and all this violence being committed in my eyes affecting me in a sort of deeper level? There's definitely articles that say like, oh, violence helps you comprehend with this stuff, but I'm not conscious of that. So what other unconscious things happening that might be hurting me, I guess?
That's, I guess, the whole big question.
We haven't answered.
I think that, I guess something to think about, to take away from all of this moving forward, is like, you and I are watching things very differently. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that's only a strength for
I think that's a selling point.
content,
Yeah,
but it's also a strength for just talking about things too, because you are going to help me appreciate it, and I can help you contextualize it in a different way, that you might only hypothetically know about. But I am viewing these movies in a very, you said you're not viewing them in a unique way. You are among other fans who are admiring the craftsmanship and the story and the narrative, and I am a very literal viewer who is directly like worried about what my brain will look like after the film, but also kind of excited to see what my brain looks like after the film. And those contexts are important, and we kind of knew it going into it, but it's becoming like more and more apparent the more of these that we watch.
This is hitting at a deeper level than I was not anticipating.
I know, I thought we were just going to do like a dinky podcast.
I thought we were just going to watch it and you're going to be like, this movie sucks because of these reasons. I'd be like, yeah, that's right. And then, wow, I never thought of that. But instead it's just like, hey, we're watching this movie. I'm like, yeah, isn't this great? You're like, well, let's think about things.
Us? We're going to think about things.
It makes you think, doesn't it, Jamie?
It just really makes you think, Eric.
Okay.
Thinking with Eric and Jamie. A podcast. It's like, that's what media is for, isn't it? It's just to reflect your experiences back to you, or help you learn how to empathize with other people and live all of the lives you can't live. That's all media is. That's the point of stories. That's why humans are storytelling animals, is the name of a popular book, like a communications book. That's like what makes us humans, is telling stories. So I don't know why I do know why. I do know why I wasn't able to extend that understanding and grace of the function of media to horror as a genre, because I was so fucking afraid of it. Because I was so scared I would see something I couldn't unsee, and because of the way my brain works, I would just be torturing myself with that image of torture or whatever, like, for the rest of my life. And that is why I couldn't extend that understanding, but I know that's not correct. So that's why, even, like, we might, maybe I will take this back. Maybe we will stop the podcast down the road, but this conversation was born out of me thinking, okay, I need to make sure I am watching these in a way that is safe for me, and that doesn't come from the environment or anything that you can do, Eric. It comes from my own audiencing of the text. And by the text, I mean the film. And I think I have been doing that, but it's just like, on my end, I'm constantly checking in with myself, being like, how is this affecting me? And what I was worried about before I was able to talk through it was that it was going to make me like a bad person, or that it was going to negatively affect my empathy or my ability to understand other people, when I think it only will open it up. and challenge the ways that I am maybe closed-minded, or challenge the ways that I don't understand concepts. It will give me something to chew on, and there's no shame in chewing on it and trying to work to understand it, you know? So I think that this was and the podcast might stop. It might, down the road, I might be like, well, it happened. Later. Enjoy the 5 episodes we have, you know, and that might be it, and that's that. But from where I'm standing right now is what I am most excited about, and what I think is the most valuable thing, is the meaning that you and I are going to draw out of whatever we consume. And that's when it becomes moral, because it will become more important than just us watching a movie, because it's like us having these kind of conversations and someone listening, and maybe it will be helpful to them, or something that we have said will challenge their worldview in a good or a bad way, and we'll find out on Twitter, I'm sure. But I think that when you extend your own understanding past yourself and apply your unique lens that everyone has to a film or a experience or a video game or whatever, and you're able to draw the meaning out of that, it will help you be a human better. It will help you make the experience of being a human easier, which is like exactly what you're talking about in that study.
Yes. I don't know what to, yes, you're a very well spoken person instead of optimistic. I don't know what to respond.
I'm gonna cough into the just like a tiny voice. Yes. Do you? I mean, I guess. So you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to say. I'm curious to see how this continues on.
I love you, Eric. You're a good.
I love you too, Jamie.
You're a good friend.
Thank you.
Good podcaster.